Hey, friend. Welcome, welcome. In episode 1 of this podcast, I shared my story about my struggle in corporate America and how I started my first service-based business. That episode 1 has been my most listened to episode. If you haven't listened to it yet, please go listen to it. You will be massively inspired and encouraged by my story. Now, fast forward 11 years later, this first service-based business has now become my 9 to 5. Don't worry, you understand why I said that when you listen to episode 1. This is now where I pour most of my work energy. I have a team I'm accountable to. I show up like everyone else to work and empower my team to do their work. Now, as I start my second service-based business, I realized that I had to implement boundaries to help me create more time to work on this second service business I am starting. Now, if you're working a 9 to 5 job and you're wondering, how can I juggle both a 9 to 5 and starting a business? This episode is for you. I'm going to talk about the 3 boundaries you need to implement to create more time to work on your service-based business after your 9 to 5. Stay tuned as I read a review and dive into today's episode. Today's review is from Jen on Apple Podcast. The review is titled, Great Podcast. Perfect podcast to listen to if you're wanting or have already begun the process of starting your business. She is full of tactical advice that can help in whatever stage you're in. Thank you so much, Jen, for your awesome review. If this podcast has given you tactical advice in your current stage of business, please pause me now and go leave me a 5-star written review on Apple Podcasts so that this podcast can reach more people. Scroll to the bottom of the podcast page where you're listening right now. You will see the ratings and review section. Locate the Write a Review purple link, enter your title, click on the 5-star icon, type in your written review, and click on Submit. Thank you so much in advance for your awesome review. Let's dive into today's episode. Hey sis, welcome to the Start That Business podcast, where you will find practical solutions that empower you to start your service-based business. I'm your host, Chichi Ukomadu, an entrepreneur, wife, mom of 3, and a Jesus follower. 10 years ago, I was afraid of giving up my desire to build a corporate career and say yes to the Holy Spirit's nudge to start that business. I believe personal fulfillment comes from letting go of your way and saying yes to God's way so you can become all you were created to be. If you're ready to find personal fulfillment, grab a cup of coffee, tea, or hot cocoa, and your favorite snack. It's time to take your first step to start that business. You know the one I'm talking about? Yes, that one you've been putting up for a long time. For those that haven't listened to episode 1 of my podcast where I shared my story, I'll just summarize it a little bit. So in 2005, I relocated to the United States from my home country. And between 2005 and 2012, I struggled to get a job in corporate America. It was so bad that in 2012, I decided to start my first service-based business so that I could create a job for myself. So fast forward 11 years later, that first service-based business is now my 9 to 5. So I have a job. Now I'm in the process of starting a second service-based business and finding that I have to juggle both. And if you are in the same place right now, maybe you have your own 9 to 5 and you're trying to start your first service-based business, I totally understand where you are. So now that I am juggling both, I had to create boundaries to help me manage my time working on both businesses. And here are the 3 boundaries you need to implement to create more time to work on your own service-based business after your 9 to 5. Now, the first boundary you need to create is, wait for it, you need to stop working on your 9 to 5 after a set time and take your break time. So I realized with my first service-based business, I realized that sometimes I'll work from 9 a.m. to like 10 p.m. I didn't have like a clear set time. Whenever work was available, I would just work. I'm like, yeah, I just work from sometimes 9 to 12 p.m. or 12 a.m. So, but now that I am building a second business, I'm realizing that to be effective at running both, I have to now set that boundary. So I told myself, my work on my first business is from 9 to 5. So once it's 5 o'clock, I need to stop working on that business and honor that boundary so that I can rest, refresh, and have time to work on my second business. So you might be in the same situation too. It's called 9 to 5 for a reason. If you're listening to this podcast, you're probably not trying to climb the corporate ladder. You're trying to start a business and move into the next phase of what God is calling you to do. So you need to put this same boundary into place. If you don't have a set time where you start and end your work, you will find that your job will take all the time, all your time, and you will not have time to work on your service business idea. Another thing you need to start doing is to start taking your break time. Most of us will just walk when it's our break time. We'll continue working and we're eating our lunch in front of our computer and walking through our break time. For me, I had to stop doing that. And I found that my break time, which is usually an hour, is time that I can use to do one or two activities on this new service-based business I'm starting. So you can do the same thing too. Instead of walking through your break time, pause. Once it's your break time, most employers, the break time is usually between 12 to 1. Pause, step away from your computer, take your food, go and have your lunch break. While you're at your lunch break, you can use that time to work on your service-based business. And once your lunch break is over, you go back to your 9 to 5. I don't know if you've heard about Parkinson's law, but Parkinson's law is simply the observation that the duration of work expands to fill its allotted time span, regardless of the amount of work to be done. It simply means if I tell myself that, okay, it will take me 1 hour to complete a task, my whole entire being will work for the whole 1 hour. Now, if I reduce that work time to 30 minutes and maybe I set a timer, the same work that took me an hour to complete, now that I have a timer and a shorter time, it will take me shorter to get that work done because now my brain is looking at the timer and I'm able to stay focused and work faster. So it's simply saying that if you allocate 9 to 5 to do your regular day job, you will use up that whole time. And if you allocate more time, then you use up more time. So try to contain the work you do between your 9 to 5 hours. Then another thing that I've also found useful that helps me completely shut down at 5 o'clock and transition into doing work on my second service-based business is having what I call a workday shutdown routine. Now, what is a workday shutdown routine? A workday shutdown routine is simply a series of steps that I create to say, okay, this is how I'm going to end my workday. So my workday shutdown routine, I have things like check my email for the last time, check my Slack message for the last time, and turn on my out of office email autoresponder. So I find that when I go through this checklist and do these things before I leave my 9 to 5, it helps bring closure to my work day. So when I leave the office and I come home and I'm working on my second business, my mind is not wondering, oh, is there work that I didn't finish at my day job. So I find that my work day shutdown routine helps me run through a checklist, and I'm able to kind of summarize and wrap up my day before I leave the office and come home and go into working on my second business. So you can do the same thing to create a work day shutdown routine. What are the things you need to go through as a checklist before you shut down your day? Maybe you go through your email for the last time. You check your company communication platform to see if anybody sent you any message. You can check the task that you set out to do for that day, what you have done, what is left. You can move it to the next day. You say, okay, I'm going to work on this ones when I come in tomorrow. Once you're able to shut down like that, your brain, it brings closure to your day, and you can transition and go home without taking your work home and focus on working on your service-based business or your service-based business idea. Another thing I want to mention, I don't know what your work environment is. You might have a manager, a boss that might want you to work extended hours. It is helpful to start pulling back, because sometimes some of us just say, oh, yes, yes, I can take on that extra hour now. Now that you're building a new or you're starting your first service-based business, or maybe like me, you're starting your second one, you have to start pulling back and learning when to say no. Is part of building boundaries, because if your colleagues and your managers are always used to hearing yes from you for every time they give you work that extends your time beyond your regular work hours, then they will take that as the norm, and they will not respect your boundaries. So you need to start saying, oh, I'm sorry, I can't take on this extra work today because I have something else I have to do after work. So that's another way you can start enforcing this boundary in case you're working in a workplace where they're already used to you saying yes, yes all the time. All right, the second boundary you need to implement to create more time to work on your side hustle or service-based business after your 9 to 5 is use a digital timer to focus on working on your top priorities during your 9 to 5. Now, I find that sometimes when we're at work, when we're at our day job, we might get distracted with colleagues coming to ask for one thing or the other, or just chatting or browsing mindlessly. But this is a boundary that I have had to implement now that I have two businesses that I'm working. I use as much as possible a digital timer. I've shared the one I use with you. It's called Egg Timer. Is e.ggtimer.com. I always have it on my computer, and when I need to focus on my top priorities for my work day, I set the timer to 15 minutes or more, and I get to work. It helps me stay focused. It helps me maximize my work day, my 9 to 5 work hour, so that when I leave my job, I don't feel like I didn't accomplish what I was supposed to do in my regular day job. So that is the second boundary you need to implement. Learn how to work with a digital timer so that you can get your top priorities knocked out and you can be more productive in your day. The third boundary you need to implement to create more time to work on your service-based business or idea is stop engaging in energy draining activities after your 9 to 5. Yes, you heard me say that. So that's something that I personally had to start doing, because I find that after my 9 to 5 work day, I just want to chill. I just want to chill on Instagram and scroll through my feed, looking at what everybody else is doing or what everybody else is creating. And what I find is after I've done that for like maybe 15 minutes or 30 minutes, I start feeling drained. I feel like someone just drained all my energy. Now I'm struggling to work on anything else. So I've had to implement this boundary myself, especially now that I'm juggling two businesses. I had to stop engaging in energy draining activities. So scrolling Instagram or social media platforms mindlessly, that's one energy draining activity for me. Yours might be something else. Yours might be maybe watching a movie on a weekday. I definitely stopped doing that too. I save my movie watching to the weekend, so I have something to look forward to. Yours might be your phone. You're just on your phone a lot after your 9 to 5. What I did for my phone is I gave my phone a bedtime. Yes, I did that. So I told myself that whatever I'm doing by 9:30, as long as every member of my family is at home, I am going to put my phone to bed. So I put it on silent, do not disturb, and I charge it in my closet. I don't charge it in my bedroom so that there's no distraction from my phone and I can focus my time and do other things. So for you, you might want to do that. You might want to give your phone a bedtime. And once you stop engaging in these energy draining activities, you want to replace them with energy replenishing activities. So what I do after my 9 to 5, I go to the gym. I work out because it gives me energy. I'm able to shift from my 9 to 5 job and I'm able to think about, oh, this new business I'm starting. So exercise definitely helps. I also listen to podcasts. So I will listen to podcasts. It gets my creative juices running and it gets me excited. So maybe you can listen to my podcast after your 9 to 5 on your drive back home to just shift your mind from your day job to this new business you want to start. So stop engaging in energy draining activities after your 9 to 5 and start engaging in energy replenishing activities. All right, let's recap real quick. The 3 boundaries you need to implement to create more time to work on your side hustle or service-based business after your 9 to 5 is: number 1, stop working on your 9 to 5 after a set time and also take your break time. Number 2, use a digital timer to focus on working on your top priorities during your 9 to 5 work day. Number 3, stop engaging in energy draining activities after 9 to 5 and start engaging in energy replenishing activities. Isaiah 40, verse 29 says, He gives strength to the weary and increases the power of the weak. My prayer for you is that you will have strength where you're weary, and I pray for increased power where you're weak so that you can implement the boundaries you need to launch and grow your God-given business. Thank you so much for listening to today's episode. If this podcast has infused hope, encouragement, and motivation into your life, please pause me right now and go leave me a 5-star written review on Apple Podcasts so that this podcast can reach more people. Please share this podcast with family, friends, or colleagues who have been talking about starting a service-based business, or maybe the ones who already started so they can get the help they need. Keep listening for more impactful episodes. I'll meet you here next week. Hey sis, before you go, if this podcast has encouraged you, helped you, inspired you, or taught you something new, please head over to Apple Podcasts and search for Start That Business Podcast and leave me a written review. That's one of the ways I know this podcast is impacting your life. Thank you so much. I'll also love to connect with you on Instagram. My handle is @ChichiUkomadu. Until next time, always remember you have all you need to start that business. I'll see you soon.